It started like any typical morning, until everything changed. A composed black woman walked into a courthouse, unaware that she was about to face mistreatment at the hands of those sworn to protect justice. They saw her as insignificant, subjecting her to humiliation and abuse while laughing. But what they failed to realize was that they had targeted the wrong person. She wasn't just an ordinary citizen. She held the legal power to bring them down. What unfolded next was a whirlwind of justice, revelation, and an unexpected courtroom drama that overturned everything. Stay tuned. You're not prepared for what comes next. Also, let us know where and when you're watching by dropping a comment below. Just after 8 a.m., Celeste Monroe stepped out of her silver Buick and climbed the stone steps of the Charleston Federal Courthouse. The morning sun crept through Spanish moss-covered trees, casting long shadows over the stairs. Adjusting her navy blazer collar, she squared her shoulders and gripped a slender leather portfolio. Her heels clicked gently on the concrete, each step a silent assertion. Celeste never wore her judicial robe outside the courtroom. She preferred to enter buildings quietly and unassumingly, like any citizen. But that morning, she was met with a different reception. She wasn't greeted as a judge or even recognized as someone in authority. To them, she was just another black woman walking into a place where power was rarely shared. At the security checkpoint, the atmosphere shifted the moment she arrived. Deputy Hank Riker, known for his rigid demeanor and old-fashioned views, narrowed his eyes as she approached the metal detectors. Unfamiliar with her, and uninterested, he stepped forward, crossing his muscular arms and raising a gloved hand. "Ma'am," he said roughly, "you need to step aside." Celeste paused briefly. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't answer immediately, his gaze scanning her from her neatly twisted silver hair to her crisp slacks and calm, confident eyes. Something about her unsettled him. She looked like she belonged there. Yet in his mind, people like her needed reminders about who was really in charge. "No ID shown. You can't just walk into a federal building looking like that," he muttered. Calmly, Celeste reached into her blazer and revealed her federal credentials. The badge shimmered under the lights, but Riker barely glanced at it. He took it, gave it a quick look, and slipped it into his pocket. She raised an eyebrow. "I'd appreciate that back." He stepped closer. "In a hurry somewhere, sweetheart?" His words stung. A younger female guard near the X-ray machine watched silently, clearly aware of the tension, but saying nothing. "I have to get to a courtroom," Celeste said firmly. "You'll follow my procedure," Riker snapped. "That includes random checks. Come with me." Before she could respond, he grabbed her upper arm and led her down a side hallway, away from public view, into a small, windowless screening room. Inside was a single steel chair, a rolling cart with scanning devices, and a pair of clippers resting on the edge. The cold air pressed in. Celeste's heart pounded. "I don't consent to this. You have no legal grounds to detain me. This is suspicious behavior." "That's reason enough," he said, motioning to the chair. "Sit." She remained still. He leaned in, voice low and threatening. "That badge you flashed means nothing here. Not to me." Suddenly, two other officers entered. One a nervous man in his 30s, who grabbed her left wrist, the other holding the chair steady. Celeste's voice rose. "This is an abuse of power. I want your names." No one answered. Riker picked up the clippers. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Standard procedure. You might be hiding something under that hair," he said, motioning toward her silver curls. Celeste tried to stand, but his firm grip pushed her back into the chair. The clippers buzzed, filling the room with a harsh mechanical whir. Before she could react, she felt the cold blades touch her scalp. Thick strands of silver hair fell to the floor. One, then another, and then more. Her breath caught, but she didn't cry out or flinch. She sat, stripped of her dignity, strand by strand, watching the piles grow like fragments of her past being torn away. Laughter echoed from one of the guards. "She looks better already," he sneered. "You should have shown some respect coming in," Riker said, brushing hair off his sleeve. "Now you look presentable." Celeste clenched her fists, knuckles whitening, but her voice was steady when she spoke again. "You'll regret this," he sneered. "People like you always say that." And just as suddenly as it started, it was over. Riker opened the door, gesturing toward the hallway. "You're free to go. Courtroom's that way," he mocked. Celeste rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She retrieved her badge from Riker's desk without asking, and walked into the hall. Her steps were steady, expression unreadable, but inside a fire burned, hotter than anger, deeper than humiliation. It was purpose, and in minutes, that purpose would change everything. Because Riker didn't know this. She wasn't there as an observer, a defendant, or someone seeking mercy. She was the judge. And she was about to take her seat on the bench. The buzzing of the clippers echoed in her mind as she approached the courtroom, each step heavier. Not from fear, but from down the hall, low murmurs drifted through the courtroom doors. It was a high-profile morning, a hearing on police misconduct involving officers from a violent protest last year. With national attention and heavy media presence, Celeste was supposed to enter from private chambers, her robe ready inside, staff prepared to maintain decorum. But that plan no longer mattered. She paused outside the courtroom, took a deep breath, and then pushed both doors open wide. The room fell silent instantly. Conversations cut off mid-sentence, heads turned. Realizations swept through the crowd. Her heels clicked loudly as she passed rows of lawyers, reporters, plaintiffs, and defendants, some confused, others disbelieving. At the front, behind the judge's bench, the chair sat empty, waiting. And then it hit them, the woman they'd seen, escorted through the hall like a suspect, the woman whose scalp bore the marks of brutality, was no victim. She was the judge. Celeste took her place behind the bench, turning slowly to face the courtroom. Her face was calm and cold, not peaceful, but precise. A pen dropped near the defense table. Riker, the bailiff who had wielded the clippers, stood motionless by the side door. Their eyes met, and his lips parted, silent. Blood drained from his face. Celeste didn't flinch. She reached for the robe folded neatly on her chair's arm, and slipped it on with deliberate care. It settled on her shoulders like armor. She turned to the court clerk. "Is the docket ready? Voice even?" The clerk's voice cracked. "Yes, Your Honor." Celeste nodded once and lowered herself into the chair. The leather groaned softly beneath her. Her gaze fixed ahead, deliberately avoiding the man who had humiliated her, for now. "We will begin today with preliminary testimony in Case 2371F, United States versus Charleston Police Department," she said, as if nothing had happened. Charges included abuse of power, excessive force, and civil rights violations. All parties present? A chorus of "Yes, Your Honor," answered back. Attorneys shifted uneasily. Some eyes widened. Others showed guilt or anger. Anger that a black woman had dared to return after they presumed her broken. She ignored them all. "We shall proceed." The first witness was an officer on duty during the protest, a man who had shoved an elderly veteran to the ground, breaking 2 ribs during a peaceful demonstration. Celeste listened intently, taking notes, but asking no questions, yet. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Riker slowly retreating toward the back of the courtroom. His hands twitched at his belt, legs restless, as if wanting to disappear. He knew what was coming. He was right. After the second witness, she called a recess. The courtroom emptied quickly. Even lawyers whispered cautiously. After a few minutes, only her clerk, 2 officers, and Riker stayed in the room. She finally looked at him. "Deputy Riker," her voice sharp as glass. He froze mid-step, then slowly moved forward, mouth stammering. "Yes, Your Honor." She gestured to the open center of the courtroom. He obeyed, walking like a man headed toward a cliff's edge. "State your full name for the record." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Hank Riker." "How long have you served as bailiff here?" 14 years. She tapped a pen on her legal pad, once, twice, then leaned in. "And in those 14 years, how many women have you assaulted in that screening room?" Color drained from his face. "Your Honor, I didn't know." "That's not my question." He looked around for support. None came. "How many complaints have been filed against you?" I'm not sure." Celeste's voice sharpened, not louder, but cutting precisely. 12. 12 formal complaints. All buried, all dismissed. Because you hid behind procedure and protocol. His mouth trembled. "I didn't know who you were. I thought—" "And there lies the problem," she interrupted, voice cracking the silence. "You thought I was nobody. Just another black woman you could intimidate, shave, and humiliate for sport." The courtroom went dead silent. "You didn't even ask my name." Riker tried to speak, but no words came. Celeste rose from the bench. "Because of you, this courthouse, this supposed temple of justice, has been stained. Because of your actions, the integrity of this court is now in question. And because you assaulted a federal judge on her own grounds, you are now under criminal investigation." She turned to the officers by the exit. "Take Deputy Riker into custody. Separate him from the general population. Formal charges to follow." They moved quickly, cuffs ready. "No! Wait! You can't do this!" Riker shouted. He was wrong. The courtroom no longer felt like a courtroom. Deputy Hank Riker, once a symbol of control and intimidation, was now gone, escorted out in handcuffs by 2 silent officers. His badge surrendered, power stripped away. But the aftershock lingered. In the silence, in the hum of ceiling fans, in the attorneys and the silent crowd of spectators, some still wide-eyed from earlier events, waited in anticipation. They wondered what she would do next. Would this be just a moment or the start of a movement? She struck the gavel once. "Court is now in session," she declared, and immediately the room settled. Her focus shifted to the lawyers at the prosecution table. "Please call your next witness." The room fell silent again as Lieutenant Daniel Cook was sworn in. She recognized the type. Confident, polished, trained to lie smoothly without breaking a sweat. The prosecutor began a questioning, careful and deliberate.
Lieutenant Cook, you were present at the demonstration on May 14th last year, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you supervised a team of 7 officers at that time.
That's correct.
Did you personally authorize the use of force against protesters?
Cook leaned slightly forward, addressing the mic as if giving a press briefing.
I authorized non-lethal crowd control measures after protesters became aggressive. There was shouting, pushing, and some were armed with bottles and rocks.
Were there any injuries reported among your team?
No, ma'am.
And the protesters' injuries, were they severe?
Mostly minor bruises.
Celeste's voice cut through before the prosecutor could continue.
Lieutenant Cook, do you consider a crushed trachea to be a minor injury?
The question hung in the air.
No, ma'am. Certainly not.
Celeste leaned in.
Then why did your official report describe it as soft tissue trauma consistent with resistance?
Cook hesitated.
That's standard phrasing based on initial impressions.
Initial impressions from whom?
I believe Officer Valdez wrote that section.
She fixed her gaze on him.
Did you review and approve that description?
After a pause, he replied.
Yes, Your Honor, knowing the victim was 17 years old and unarmed.
Her tone remained steady.
Do you believe justice was served that day?
Silence.
I believe protocol was followed.
He said finally. She leaned back.
That's not the question.
Cook cleared his throat.
With all due respect, Your Honor, I cannot answer that. It's not my role.
Celeste nodded slowly.
No, it is mine.
She turned to the prosecution.
Proceed.
The rest of the testimony was clinical, but each fact landed like a punch. It wasn't just about the details, it was about how they tried to normalize the unacceptable. When the recess was called, whispers filled the gallery. Reporters typed rapidly. Advocates scribbled notes. A woman near the back silently mouthed, "Thank you," as Celeste passed. In her chambers, she removed her robe and hung it carefully, staring at it longer than usual. The robe looked plain and harmless on the hanger, but outside that room it held weight. It transformed everything. When she wore it, people stood, listened, and feared her authority. Yet, just 2 hours earlier, without it, she had been assaulted and stripped of dignity. That contradiction now burned inside her, echoed in her pulse. A knock interrupted her thoughts.
Your Honor,
Her clerk said.
someone from the DOJ is here to see you. They said it's urgent.
Celeste straightened.
Send them in.
A man in a gray suit entered, calm and composed. He handed her a sealed envelope.
Judge Monroe, I'm with the Office of Civil Rights. We were dispatched immediately after this morning's incident was reported.
Celeste opened the letter. This courthouse is under federal review. What happened in that screening room isn't just misconduct. It's a Title 18 violation. Now that we know the victim was a federal judge, he trailed off. Celeste said nothing. She didn't have to. We are launching an immediate investigation into Charleston District Courthouse staff, past complaints, suppression of reports, and possible obstruction. Good, she replied quietly. Start with the supervisors who buried those 12 complaints against Riker. Then review the judges who approved them. He nodded as if he expected her response. Also, Judge Monroe, the footage from this morning has gone viral. It's everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, social media. Even some senators are talking about it. Celeste shook her head faintly. I didn't do it for them. He smiled. That's exactly why it matters. After he left, she sank into her chair. Outside, the next group of defense attorneys gathered. She could hear their footsteps, the shuffle of papers, and whispered last-minute conversations. The fight wasn't over, but she was ready. Today wasn't just about exposing a single racist officer. It was about uncovering the system beneath it, and it was far from finished unraveling. The courtroom was packed. News had spread fast. The arrest, the viral video, the woman who'd been humiliated but stood her ground, the federal judge who reclaimed her seat despite everything. Camera crews surrounded the courthouse. Reporters filled the back rows. Civil rights lawyers arrived from Atlanta, D.C., and Chicago. The tension was palpable. This was no longer just a trial. It was history and justice colliding in real time. Judge Celeste Monroe stood behind the bench as her clerk whispered, "The defense attorneys are here. They want special counsel." Celeste raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? They say the case is compromised, that you are personally biased. She exhaled slowly. Of course, they'll try to twist everything. They can't deny the facts, so they attack the messenger. Celeste nodded once. Let them ask. I'll answer on the record. She entered the courtroom buzzing with tension. All rise. The room complied. She didn't look around, just took her place, tapped her gavel once. Be seated. A defense attorney in a pinstripe suit stood, confident, his voice trained for jury trials and TV. Your Honor, before proceeding, we formally request special counsel due to recent events, Celeste interrupted. You mean the arrest of Deputy Riker and this morning's hallway incident? He hesitated. Yes, Your Honor. We're concerned about judicial impartiality. A murmur rose from the gallery. Celeste remained composed. So, You suggest that because I was assaulted today, I cannot do my job? He responded carefully. The perception of bias, yes. Celeste raised a hand. Let me stop you right there. I was publicly assaulted, not for what I said or did, but because of who I am. Someone saw a black woman walk into court and decided she couldn't have power. Let that sink in. What did I do? I took my seat. I followed every rule. I was calm, respectful, even when others weren't. The attorney clenched his jaw. Her voice sharpened. Real bias looks like a man shaving a woman's head without cause, without warrant, without asking her name. Real bias is 12 ignored complaints buried by this institution. Want to talk conflict of interest? Let's talk about the judges who approved Riker's behavior, the prosecutors who didn't act, and your firm's history defending abusive officers. He opened his mouth to object, but she was right. Celeste stood straight. This court will proceed. I will not recuse myself. If you doubt my authority, appeal. I'll even provide the paperwork. She struck the gavel. Next witness. The prosecution called a new witness, not a protester or victim, but a former courthouse employee. Denise Talley, a middle-aged black woman, sharp in a suit, with cropped hair and glasses, stepped forward. Celeste recognized her immediately, not just from files but for years of quiet, efficient work and records, never complaining. Now she was ready to speak. Sworn in, Denise adjusted her blazer. The prosecutor asked, Miss Talley, can you describe your role here? I was records supervisor for 8 years. Before that, I worked the front desk. During your time, were you aware of complaints against Deputy Riker? Her eyes hardened. Too many to count. Can you estimate? 12 official? At least twice as many informal. What happened to those complaints? Denise glanced at Celeste. They were mishandled. Marked resolved when they weren't. Some vanished entirely. The courtroom stirred. Who ordered that? There was a pause. Judge Terrence Mahoney. That name hit hard. Mahoney, her mentor and sponsor, had retired 6 months prior with a spotless reputation. Yet here was a truth that couldn't be ignored. Why suppress those complaints? Denise's voice shook. He said bringing them up would undermine public trust and make the courthouse look weak. Celeste sat still. That lie was familiar. Justice delayed for appearances, abuse tolerated for order. Around the room, faces shifted, some realizing the system they served was silence, not justice. Denise grew stronger. I watched men like Riker walk these halls with impunity. I saw black interns searched and questioned, witnesses intimidated and ignored. Every time I spoke up, I was told, that's just how it is. Well, not anymore. Celeste swallowed hard. This testimony didn't just support a case, it shattered a system. For me, she got a recess. As people stood, a young reporter whispered, "She's not just running this courtroom, she's rewriting it." And he was right. This was no longer a trial. It was a reckoning with ripples far beyond the room. By early afternoon, the courthouse steps were no longer quiet. What began with a few reporters grew into a crowd of protesters, leaders, citizens, black, white, old, young, some holding signs, others watching silently. It wasn't chaos, but focused anticipation. Inside, Celeste sat at her desk, watching the crowd. Signs read, "Justice starts now. Protect black women." 12 complaints, 0 accountability. She closed her eyes, not to escape, but to absorb it all. The noise, the pressure, the truth, finally surfacing after years buried beneath red tape and silence. Another knock. Her clerk entered, followed by a man she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Reverend Marcus Hill. His gray beard was fuller, his eyes tired but kind. Judge Monroe. he said calmly. Reverend, she replied, standing. I won't take long. Just wanted you to know we're out there. We see your work, and we support you. She nodded, swallowing emotion. He handed her a folded paper. Some of these people outside were victims too, of Riker and others like him. They never testified, but are ready now. If you want their stories, they'll talk. She unfolded the list. Names, phone numbers, notes, longer than she expected. How many are new complaints? Most. Some date back years. Some were too afraid. Others told it wasn't worth it. Celeste looked up. They were wrong. It's worth it now. Marcus smiled faintly. Because of you. She said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. After he left, she stared at the list again. These weren't just names. They were the ignored, dismissed, ridiculed, but not anymore. Back in the courtroom, the gallery had doubled. News of Denise Talley's testimony spread rapidly. Reporters live-streamed. People outside watched on phones through courthouse windows, huddled under the October sun. The atmosphere had shifted. When Celeste entered, the room rose, not just out of tradition, but in recognition of what she represented now. She tapped the gavel once. We're ready to proceed. The next witness was unexpected. The U.S. Marshals sent someone not to investigate, but to testify. Andrew Taylor, a black man in his late 50s, with over 20 years of service, walked with a slight limp from an injury sustained during an arrest gone wrong in 2001. He had once been stationed at this courthouse, and now stood before the bench with a truth he could no longer keep silent. He took the oath, sat, and adjusted the mic. I worked here from 2004 to 2012, he said. I saw a lot. Most of it I ignored. I didn't want trouble. Didn't want to be labeled the angry black officer. He looked at Celeste. But what I saw from Riker, I should have reported it. I didn't. I regret that. Celeste nodded, letting him speak freely. Taylor continued. It started small. Disrespect, over-policing young men, rude comments. But by 2010, it was obvious Riker had no regard for the law or humanity. I saw him intimidate witnesses, threaten people with no cause, and cover up evidence. He paused. We all turned a blind eye because no one wanted to be the whistleblower. That's the problem. The courtroom was silent. Taylor's honesty cracked the veneer of silence and fear. Celeste tapped her gavel gently. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Your courage is noted. Outside, the crowd cheered quietly but powerfully. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was here, unfolding in real time with every testimony, every truth laid bare. Stamped with bureaucratic disregard, allegations unverified, no corroborating evidence found, no further action warranted. Yet, hidden deep within the folder, a memo caught Celeste's eye. A confidential exchange from 5 years prior between Judge Mahoney and the courthouse security chief. She read it twice. It acknowledged that while Riker was tough and abrasive, he maintained order, especially with certain groups. Best not to disturb the status quo. Her fingers clenched the paper until it crumpled. There it was, the unspoken truth made explicit. It wasn't just about Riker anymore. It was about the entire system that had shielded him, protected him, endorsed and encouraged his escalating cruelty, all in the name of maintaining order. Celeste leaned back, gazing at the ceiling. This was no longer a mere case. It was a reckoning. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her clerk entered softly. Your Honor, the Senate Judiciary Committee has sent a formal request for your statement on judicial oversight failures linked to the Riker case. Celeste smiled, without humor. Of course they did. The clerk hesitated before adding, "Also, 2 retired judges and a former district attorney resigned today, citing health issues." Celeste said nothing. She stood and commanded, "Bring in all the attorneys. We're finishing this today." An hour later, the courtroom overflowed, standing room only. Reporters from major outlets packed the gallery, while a group of young black law students filled the front rows, eyes wide with anticipation. This was no longer just Charleston's issue. It had become a national moment. Celeste took her seat and tapped the gavel. "Court is now in session." She addressed the room. "Before closing arguments, I'm submitting new evidence. A folder containing all complaints filed against Deputy Riker, documents about their suppression, and the names of those who dismissed them." Despite defense objections, Celeste silenced them with a raised hand. "Sit down." Turning to the audience, she declared, "Let the record show. This court will no longer shield institutions at the cost of individuals. Silence is not neutrality." Her gaze swept the room. "Every signature in this folder marks a deliberate choice to ignore victims, protect predators, and uphold a false sense of order built on fear. That ends today." A hush fell, broken by a voice from the back. An older man stood, nervous. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Celeste nodded. "Go ahead." "My name is Louis Bryant," he said shakily. "In 2011, Riker arrested me here, after my daughter's case was dismissed. He slammed me into a wall and broke 2 ribs. "Did you file a complaint?" Celeste asked. "I did, at the front desk. They told me I had tripped and fallen. That's what the report said. I never came back, but I'm here now." One by one, others began to stand. 5, 10, 15 people, all with stories long silenced. Finally, voices rising. Celeste watched quietly, neither crying nor smiling. The truth was finally out. Not whispered, hidden, or protected by robes or badges, but spoken aloud. The last day dawned amidst a torrential rainstorm, washing over Charleston like a warning and a reckoning. Despite the weather, people arrived. Reporters, protesters, clerks, interns, witnesses, all bringing umbrellas, signs, cameras. The world knew this courtroom was no longer about justice. It was about history. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Celeste entered silently, without robe or gavril, standing plain and vulnerable. "I have worn this robe and upheld procedure for years," she began. "But I've also remained silent, longer than I should have. Today, I refuse to be quiet any longer." She turned to face the packed courtroom. "This court finds Deputy Hank Riker guilty of abuse of power, civil rights violations, and official misconduct. But that's not all." She stepped forward, holding a folder. "I'm instituting the Monroe Mandate. Mandatory anti-bias training, psychological evaluations, regular review, and zero tolerance for discrimination among all courthouse personnel."
I will fight for this policy to be adopted at every level of the judiciary. What happened here should never happen again.
The courtroom was silent, some faces nodding, tears silently falling.
This is not about revenge.
She added,
It's about accountability. To those who protected Riker and allowed this to happen, you are on notice. I will recommend disbarment, investigation, and prosecution.
As the storm raged outside, Celeste nodded toward the entrance. Officers escorted Hank Riker inside, shackled, pale, and broken. He stood beside his public defender.
Mr. Riker,
She said, voice steady.
this court sentences you to the maximum penalties allowed by federal law.
She looked him in the eye.
You believed your badge made you untouchable. Now, you will sit in the seat you created for others. No badge, no robe. Just the weight of your actions.
The courtroom held its breath as Riker was led away. No applause, no cheers, just witness. Celeste closed the folder, picked up her robe, and declared, "Court is adjourned." The courthouse emptied like a storm clearing, slowly and softly. Celeste sat alone, the weight of truth spoken loud enough to lighten the burden.
Her scars, both visible and hidden, began to heal. A knock came. Her sister, Nadine, entered silently, folding a stool. You ready?
She asked. Celeste met her gaze in the mirror.
Yeah.
Clippers buzzed gently as Nadine shaved the uneven patches away, not out of shame, but as a choice for a fresh start. When finished, Celeste saw her reflection, bold, bare, strong, and beautiful.
This is who I am now,
She whispered.
Nadine corrected. No. This is who you've always been. The world just caught up.
They smiled. That night, Celeste stepped out bareheaded under city lights. No cameras, no reporters, just people. An elderly woman touched her arm, voice trembling. I never thought I'd see someone like you do what you did. Celeste held her hand.
You did more than survive. You paved the way.
A teenager approached, silently removing her hoodie to reveal a shaved head in solidarity. Celeste nodded. A silent inheritance passed. In the days after, Celeste returned to court. The robes stayed off longer. The courthouse felt different. A janitor nodded respectfully. A security officer gave a subtle thumbs up. During a routine hearing, the courtroom stood when she entered. A first. Justice had found a new face. The Monroe Mandate spread, inspiring other courts and even prompting congressional legislation. Celeste continued her work, guided by a deeper awareness, not just of the law's words, but who it had ignored. Months later, invited to speak at a middle school, Celeste found a packed room. Students had followed the trial, written essays, held signs. Be like Judge Monroe. She answered their questions honestly, especially one quiet girl's. Do you still believe in the system? Celeste paused. I don't believe in what the system was, she said, but I believe in what it can become, and in people like you who ask that question. That's how change happens. Not long after, the White House called. Celeste Monroe was awarded the Presidential Medal of Justice. At the ceremony, among dignitaries and friends, sat the quiet girl from the classroom. Celeste spoke plainly. I wasn't supposed to be here. Systems like this weren't built for people like me. When I reached this space, I was reminded I didn't belong. But I stayed. I stood. I made them see me. This medal isn't mine alone. It belongs to every woman told to be silent. Every man denied justice. Every child who feared the law. This is for you. Across the state line, Hank Riker watched the broadcast from prison. He said nothing. The silence settled. No punishment was greater than the truth he could not silence. This story is not just about one woman or one courthouse. It's about dignity, truth, and the power of saying, enough. Judge Celeste Monroe didn't just uphold the law, she became the line in the sand. She showed us that justice means accountability, courage, and integrity, even when the system fights back. For those who have witnessed slow, costly progress, this story resonates. It demands courage from ordinary people to do extraordinary things. If this story touched you, if it made you feel seen or heard, share it. Because justice doesn't end in courtrooms. Justice begins with us, right here, right now.